Hello, so here is your final video lesson of the week. We are going to revise industrialisation. We would have looked at industrialisation right at the start of the year when we looked at the exercise readings. So think about how industrialisation links to an inspector calls and what character in particular links to this idea of industrialisation. We revised elite last lesson. And how is Mrs. Burling presented as having sort of elitist beliefs and attitudes? And our new word today is collectivist. Now, a collectivist believes that we are all part of one group or teams. This idea of being together, as you can see from the Latin. So being a collectivist is very much having these socialist views of we are all, no matter what gender or class, we are all part of the human race. Essentially, we're all part of one group. So we're going to think about these sort of collectivist attitudes. So what collectivist views have we seen so far in an inspector calls? So you can pause the video and answer these questions. So industrialisation very much links to Mr. Burling. We are told that he is a prosperous manufacturer in the stage directions, and we know that he has got rich as a result of the Industrial Revolution and the rise of factories, as he is a factory owner. Mrs. Burling is presented as having elitist views because she believes that if you are rich, you are a good person, and if you are poor, you are not, as demonstrated by her whole attitude and treatment of Eva Smith. And collectivist views. Now, obviously, we see J.B. Priestley through the inspector as having collectivist views, this idea of social responsibility. But we also have seen from Sheila and Eric this idea that the way Eva Smith was treated was wrong, because no matter her gender or social class, she is still a human being and deserved to be treated like one. So today we are going to look at Eric. We'll have the final piece of the story today. So we're going to look at how he uses language to develop our impression of Eric, how this links to his beliefs and Priestley's beliefs and intentions in writing the novel, and how sort of Eric's reaction to what he did compares to Sheila, Mr. Burling's and Mrs. Burling's reaction. So again, as if by magic, I am going to switch over to the play and we will keep going.
Yes, we know.
Eric, there must be some mistake. You don't know what we've been saying.
It's a good job for him he doesn't, isn't it?
Why?
Because Mother's been busy blaming everything on the young man who got this girl into trouble. And saying he shouldn't escape and should be made an example of.
Now, that's enough, Sheila.
You haven't made it any easier for me, have you, Mother?
But I didn't know it was you. I never dreamt. Besides, you're not that type. You don't get drunk.
Of course he does. I told you he did.
You little sneak.
That's not fair. I could have told her months ago, but I didn't. I only told her tonight because I knew it was bound to come out. So I thought she might as well know in advance. Don't forget, I've already been through it.
Sheila, I simply don't understand your attitude.
Neither do I. If you'd had any sense of loyalty...
There'll be plenty of time when I've gone for you all to adjust your family relationships. But now I must hear what your son has to tell me. When did you first meet this girl?
One night last November.
Where?
In the Palace Bar. I'd be there an hour or so with 2 or 3 chaps.
What happened?
So note how Eva Smith is back in the Palace Bar, where Gerald rescued her from prostitution. So he may have been very gallant and had good intentions in rescuing her, but she still ended up back there when he dumped her.
What happened then?
I began talking to her and stood her a few drinks. I was rather far gone by the time we had to go.
Was she drunk too?
She was a bit, chiefly because she'd not had much to eat that day.
You went to her lodgings that night?
It seems I insisted. I'm not very clear about it, but afterwards she told me she didn't want me to go in, but that... Well, I was in that state when a chap easily turns nasty. And that's when it happened. And I don't even remember, that's the hellish thing.
So this is really important, but we also need to judge Eric's actions by the ideals of 1912 rather than today. So he takes Eva Smith back to where she lived. She later tells him she didn't want him to go in, so she didn't want to sleep with him. But he says because of how drunk he was in that state when a chap easily turns nasty. And it says in the script, and I threatened to make a row. So what he did is he put pressure on her to sleep with him. Now, if we were in the classroom now, we'd be having a discussion about the power of consent, which I would hope that anyone nowadays would view Eric's behaviour as essentially Eva Smith not really giving him consent for sleeping with him. But what we also need to remember is that, wrongly, things were very different in 1912. And what I've had students do in the past is basically go, oh, well, does Eric rape Eva Smith? And I genuinely don't think Priestley wants us to think that at this point. And again, it's a very, very important and very delicate issue, actually, this moment in the play, which is, again, when we study this next year and we're in the classroom, we'll have a wider conversation about it, because it's a really good opportunity to have those sorts of discussions around consent. I think the thing, in terms of your analysis of the play, the way to interpret this moment is that it's an example of Eva Smith's powerlessness as a woman. The fact that she felt that she had to sleep with Eric because he wanted to. And that was very much a reflection of the gender inequality of the time. I think that's the point that Priestley's trying to make here. But obviously in a modern context, we would view his actions through the morals and the ideals of our society.
Oh my God, how stupid it all is.
Eric, how could you?
Sheila, take your mother along to the drawing room.
I want to stay.
You heard what I said. Go on, Sybil.
Come on, Mother.
When did you meet her again?
About a fortnight afterwards.
By appointment?
No. And I couldn't remember her name or where she lived. It was all very vague, but I happened to see her in the Palace Bar.
And you took her home again?
Yes. And this time we talked a bit. She told me something about herself, and I talked too. I told her my name and what I did.
And you made love again?
Yes. I wasn't in love with her or anything, but I liked her. She was pretty and a good sport.
Gerald's relationship with Eva Smith was very different to Eric's relationship with Eva Smith was very different to Gerald's. He liked her well enough, and he visited her and they slept together on multiple occasions, but he didn't have that emotional connection to her in the way that Gerald did. It's not that he was quite in love with her, but he was close. They were in an emotional relationship for about 6 months. With Eric and Eva Smith, it was really just the physical side of the relationship.
So you had to go to bed with her.
I'm old enough, aren't I?
Go on.
We saw each other a few more times, and then she told me she was going to have a baby.
And of course she was very worried about it.
Well, yes, so was I. I was in a hell of a state about it.
Did she suggest that you ought to marry her?
She didn't want me to marry her. Said I didn't love her.
So what did you propose to do?
Well, she hadn't a job, and didn't feel like trying again for one, and she'd no money left. So I insisted on giving her enough money to keep her going, until she refused to take any more.
How much did you give her altogether?
I suppose about £50 all told.
£50? Where did you get £50 from? Well?
From the office.
My office?
Yes.
You stole it?
Not really.
What do you mean?
I'm sorry, Arthur.
It isn't my fault.
But I simply have to know what's happening.
I'll tell you what's happening. He's admitted he was responsible for the girl's condition. And now he's telling us he supplied her with money he stole from my office.
Eric.
I intended to pay it back.
We've heard that story before. How could you have paid it back?
I'd managed somehow. I had to have some money.
You damn fool. Why didn't you come to me?
Because you're not the kind of father a chap could go to when he's in trouble.
Don't talk to me like that.
No.
Your trouble is you've been spoiled.
And my trouble is that I haven't much time. You'll be able to divide the responsibility between you when I've gone. Just one last question. That's all. The girl discovered that this money you were giving her was stolen, didn't she?
Yes, that was the worst of all. She wouldn't take any more, and she didn't want to see me again. But how did you know that? Did she tell you?
She told me nothing. I never spoke to her.
She told Mother.
Sheila, she told you. Did she come here? No, she couldn't have. She didn't know I lived here. What happened, Mother? Don't look like that. Tell me what happened.
After she'd done with you, she went to your mother's committee for help. Your mother refused that help.
Then you killed her. She came to you to protect me, and you turned her away. You killed her. And the child she'd have had, too. My child.
Eric, please.
You killed them both.
Please.
Damn you.
No, I don't understand.
You don't understand anything.
You hysterical young fool!
You never did. You never even tried.
Oh. Eric picked Eva Smith up as a prostitute, slept with her on several occasions, and eventually finds out she was going to have a baby. He then steals money from Mr. Burling's office to try and keep her going, and it is because she didn't want to keep taking stolen money that she went to Mrs. Burling's charity and was looking for help, which then eventually led to her to make the decision to commit suicide. And we see there that Eric very much blames Mrs. Burling, and they're sort of having this big argument, and then the inspector, shouts at them to stop. So I'd like you to answer some questions, please, as with the lessons this week. What did Eric do to Eva Smith? So what's the sort of his involvement with her? How does this link to Eva Smith's suicide? Think about how Eric feels guilt and how that links into Priestley's intentions. And what does Eric's reaction to what his mother did reveal about the change in his character? So think about the way he's speaking to his mother in that final bit. Okay, so you can pause the video and answer those questions. So finally then, how are both Eric and Sheila presented as having collectivist views so far in the play? And how does industrialisation link to Mr. Burling's character? So recap what we looked at the start of the lesson. And that is the end of our lesson today. And I will send an email, or your class teacher will send you an email if I don't teach you, letting you know what to do in your independent task tomorrow. Very well.